Hey everyone, good to have everybody here again. Uh, let's get some audio coming on. Okay, hey, good to have everybody, folks here. Sorry about that. Always some little technical difficulties with these. If you love doing them live, if you saw the one we did last month, I was in Amsterdam and I talked about doing it in our Amsterdam office in Microsoft. And if you saw the video, you remember me being on mute when I got started. And then it turned out I was in an officially designated quiet area in the Microsoft office there. And I was kicked out and actively moved. So it was probably one of the worst roadmap calls I could have had. However, I was quite surprised to find out folks actually watched it quite a bit in the recording. So you at least got to see me suffer, but also kind of got all the info. So good to have everybody here. We essentially skipped July. We did June pretty late. So have some updates for us here. Our agenda today. Real quick, just for those that don't know me, I'm your host on these kinds of things. I'm one of the product managers on the AKS Cloud Native Platforms team. Been in Microsoft for a long time, based out of Denver, Colorado. Do things outside often as much as I can. So this is our agenda. I have a couple quick housekeeping things. I like to just kind of keep people updated, especially those folks that may have not joined before. And then we'll go through just kind of quick updates around the roadmap and some recent announcements around things. Today, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We have a special guest, Yumin Liu from our Azure Container Storage team is going to come in and talk about Azure Container Storage and the recent GA for that platform supporting persistent workloads in AKS, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned for that. I'll try to talk as briefly as I can so you don't have to hear too much of me and we can get to the more fun content. So again, what is this community? It's obviously a YouTube channel. You're sitting here watching it on YouTube. We typically do a lot of recorded content here, short videos that talk about product updates or how things work, as well as these, these kind of roadmap live sessions. We have a Twitter channel as well. If you ever want to reach out to us, if you send a message to that Twitter account, I'll read it. We'll make sure it gets answered. And we also have this Ask Me Anything that we're doing. This is kind of the third iteration of it. We're doing it today. And so you can see the link there that takes you over to the Azure subreddit. And we are willing to ask questions about basically anything, or at least anything related to AKS. A lot of times I get asked kind of what's the best way to connect with the AKS product team. Obviously, a lot of customers have like account teams and Microsoft representatives. Some folks don't. Maybe you're a startup or a small business. We want to make sure there's ways to connect. We have our GitHub repo where we have issues and things like that are tracked there, as well as our roadmap. We have the YouTube and Twitter accounts where you can provide comments, give us feedback, things like that. But we're adding this Reddit approach to at least give folks a chance to really ask a lot of questions kind of all at once. And so far it's gone pretty well. And so bring those questions there. We'll find the right people to answer them. And we'd love some feedback on better ways to kind of connect. We've considered some other options, some more meaningful kind of community things or better uses of the GitHub repo, but we don't want to go too far with it and end up with kind of a black hole of things not getting answered. It's fairly hard to keep up with the amount of activity we see. So we'd love to hear your ideas on that and figure out kind of, again, other ways that we can connect. We do have the blog. If you haven't heard about this blog, in the early stages, we just had a couple posts. We're starting to really ramp up with more content here. We did launch it in May. Really a new way for us to kind of reach out to you beyond things that occur in kind of the docs where you get official documentation. This is a bit more about how things work. Who is the team? Why are some of the decisions that we've made? Why did we make them? And kind of where are we headed? We might share, what we're thinking about kind of going forward in our overall strategy and see what your feedback is. And so right now, these posts don't have comments and things like that. We'll be adding that soon. But some of the posts that have been out there definitely encourage you to read the one from George Palma about AKS, past, present, future. Really great chance to kind of hear the history of where how we ended up here and kind of where we're headed. some great posts on some of the technology that we've announced recently, like Automatic, Service Connector, of course, Azure Container Storage, which we'll talk about today. Really great post on the Gateway API from one of my colleagues, Paul Yu, talking about how that will fit into the Istio add-on. Gateway API is a new part of the Kubernetes project, or at least somewhat new. And we'll be incorporating that into the Istio solution, talk a little bit about that in that post. So it's a great chance to get exposure to that part of Kubernetes. We've got some interesting posts coming in the next week or so around AI, cloud native workloads and things like that. So we'd love to hear more about what you want on the blog. Definitely go take a look, and we will have more and more coming there as we go. So let's dig right into the roadmap. As I mentioned, I think on the last call, we have had this Secure Foundation initiative that's occurred at Microsoft. I won't go through and explain it again on this call, but it has changed some of the dates and sort of priorities about how we're delivering some things. So if there were dates that you heard about in the past, they may have changed a bit. It's not that we're not really doing anything. In fact, we're very focused on important work right now. And so that may change some of the dates and so forth, and you'll see that kind of represented here. As always, if you really want to dig into the roadmap and hear about where things are, everything that I kind of present here is essentially represented right here on GitHub. And you can see things that are in progress, as well as recent previews in GA, which is typically what I'll focus on here in the coming slide. So again, I'll start with things that have GA'd recently. One of the things that we've been doing some work on is the app routing add-on. If you're not familiar with the app routing add-on, this is essentially a way to configure Ingress solutions in your AKS cluster. It allows you to add Ingress configurations, and AKS will actually install the Ingress controller, configure things like certificates and key vault, DNS configuration. And really, from an application standpoint, the app team really just has to supply the Ingress configuration and the proper annotation, and everything is all kind of wired up for you. And so we've added some new updates to it in GA, some global configuration updates for the Nginx controller, as well as this ability to set some of the thresholds around how things are scaled to map to your various workloads. The idea here is that because this is essentially a managed Ingress solution based on Nginx, a lot of customers have done their kind of bring their own Ingress or Nginx solution, and they want to be able to use app routing, but configure it somewhat the way they're able to do those custom ones. And so more and more, we're basically trying to add that ability, and you'll see some of the things we continue to add to it that fit into that category of really trying to make it easier for customers to move to this and get that more managed experience, to take that do-it-yourself part of it out of your hands and make it easier. FIPS is something, it's a federal security standard that a lot of our customers require. This is something you can enable on a node pool or in a cluster. Unfortunately, up until this GA, you actually couldn't disable FIPS. You couldn't, say, add a node pool that had FIPS if it wasn't already a FIPS-enabled environment. So this is something that we added there, that a lot of customers require that ability to turn it off, perhaps temporarily, perhaps permanently, turn it back on, things like that, that they may require. So that's something that we GA'd recently. Seems like a small thing, but any customer using this actually finds this really important. We've also done some work in the VS Code extension for Kubernetes. Definitely want you to take a look at this. If you aren't already using this, if you're doing a lot of work around AKS in VS Code, this gives you ability to do a lot of the functionality that you would to try to manage your AKS cluster right from within VS Code. So like one of the updates here was it allowed you to link your Azure Container Registry to your AKS cluster, again, right from the VS Code extension. Lots of things like that that make it easier as you're developing and working with AKS and working within VS Code. So take a look at that if you haven't seen it yet. We continue to update that regularly. And of course, the big GA here is Azure Container Storage. So again, I won't talk too much about this. Human will be coming on here in a few minutes once I shut up and talk all about what's there. So pretty exciting about ACS and what that brings to AKS. All acronyms all the time. So Another update to the app routing add-on. A lot of customers are using Ingress really more for internally routed applications that go through an internal load balancer, and they want the ability to basically just deploy the app routing add-on and automatically make sure that that is set up as a private load balancer, which is something that had to be done as an extra step. And so this makes it a lot easier to go that route right out of the gate. So that's something that you can try out in preview today. Should make it easier to do those internal applications or internally facing as far as the network config goes. So very common ask that we got. Dual stack, IPv6 is one of those things. Seems like it's been talked about forever, and it seems like it's always coming. Like I said, I do a lot of hiking and outdoor kind of exploring, and sometimes you see that summit and it just seems like you're almost there. And then you get there and you find out it was a false summit. I kind of feel like that's where we are with IPv6. We're definitely getting closer, but it's very big, and it's almost seems like we're there. So we're doing what we can to support things like dual stack throughout the environment. So we've added support in the CNI overlay that runs on Windows, the CNI powered by Cilium and so forth. So things like that are coming wherever we can. And so you'll see updates on a regular basis that support that journey towards IPv6. Node auto provision is probably the most common question that we get, as when will this GA? I think customers really like the functionality that this provides. If you're not familiar with node auto provision, essentially it's our managed Carpenter experience. This is a different way to provision compute in your cluster. The typical way was to set up various node pools, various sizes, and use the cluster autoscaler to scale those environments up and down. Node auto provision takes it and kind of reverses it. So instead of you picking the compute to hopefully match your workload, Carpenter and node auto provision actually pick the compute to map to the workload that you have. And so you just deploy your workloads, and Carpenter will find the appropriate node in the cluster or provision a new one based off of basically hints that you provide. And you tell it, hey, I only want to use these VM SKUs or not these, and so forth. And so a lot of customers have tried this out. They're ready for it to GA. We wanted it to have GA'd by now. This is one of those ones that got a little bit of a delay due to SFI. We're really working on this one as hard as we can to kind of get this GA as soon as possible, and we're headed there. And we often get asked when we GA this, are you removing all of the limitations? You'll see limitations and things like that in the documentation, and the answer is essentially yes. Like every scenario that is a GA scenario in AKS, we want them to be supported by node auto provision. The different network plugins, things like CNI overlay powered by Cilium, that's there. Azure CNI will be there. But things like bring your own CNI, we plan on trying to support those things. It may not be there right out of the gate. Like Windows support, we plan on having that there. It may not be there right away. Some things, of course, don't make sense, like cluster autoscaler. Those two things are orthogonal. They don't really go together. So those won't be there. But yes, hopefully this will be here for us soon. A lot of demand for that. Along with things like mixed SKU node pools, which effectively allows me not to necessarily just use a VM scale set with identical VM sizes within it, but mix those throughout. But the node pool still persists. It's still a node pool with mixed VM sizes in it, so I can still label it, do taints, and so forth, and all the things I choose to do with a node pool. So something that a lot of customers will try. That's a brand new preview, really within the last few weeks. Kaido, there's been some updates to Kaido. If you're not familiar, Kaido is an open source project that we have in a preview as a managed add-on to AKS. It stands for Kubernetes AI Toolchain Operator. It's essentially a solution that allows you to bring AI-based workloads and generative AI models to an AKS cluster and take care of all of the provisioning of GPU infrastructure, pulling in those models into pre-baked images, and really making it a lot easier to go from, I just want to bring a model into a cluster, into actually running it and doing inferencing and training and so forth. So we continue to add functionality to this. Fine-tuning was just added very recently. If you're working with a generative AI model of some kind, The base model is certainly useful, but most customers are bringing some kind of context-sensitive information related to your scenario and fine-tuning the model. So you can now do that with Kaido, as well as we're adding more and more OSS models. And so if you go dig into the Kaido project, there's an open source community around it. If there's things that you're looking for there, let us know. Kaido is though it runs on AKS and we're doing the open source work there, we'd love to have this be capable in other environments and other clouds. And so again, contribute to the open source project, and we can actually have this be something that can be used really throughout Kubernetes, wherever. A lot of discussion around advanced container networking services. A lot of customers, when this came out, we're super interested because of the eBPF functionality that provides. A lot of discussion around how does this map to Cilium and various versions of the Cilium platform. In AKS, essentially the recommended path is to try to use Azure CNI powered by Cilium, Azure CNI overlay, powered by Cilium. That's the most common configuration that supports most customers, probably the most performant solution that we offer. A lot of customers do want some of the functionality like FQD and filtering, support for things like Hubble. And so that's the functionality that ACNS will add along with what is already there around observability that is really powered by Retina, another open source project. And so this is something, a preview around this that'll be coming soon. I have a very large number of customers that want this functionality. And so it'll be there in ACNS. That's the way that will allow you to add that to AKS clusters you're using. Network isolated clusters, I've mentioned actually on previous roadmap calls. The preview for this is coming soon, I can assure you. Again, it's been a bit delayed, but this essentially is that ability to prevent any outbound traffic from your cluster to the external internet, which does end up forcing you to set up an ACR and pre-import the images from our public registry, the core AKS images from our public registry in that ACR. We take care of all of that for you, so essentially they can have this air-gapped AKS cluster, as we were calling it for a while, and still have it function as you'd expect. So excited to see that there and it coming. Static egress gateway is something that is essentially an open source project that we've put out there. Some customers have already tried it out. This is going to be the solution to allow you to apply IP addresses or IP ranges to particular workloads as their source, so that I can actually be a bit more granular on how I handle network permissions on the other end. So if I'm connecting to a SQL database, a Postgres database, some sort of backend solution, I can actually say only these IPs can connect. And static egress gateway allows me to be a bit more granular on which deployments or pods have which network environment around it. So that's something that you can try out today in open source, and we plan on integrating into the product, into AKS as a solution. Resource group lockdown, if you're obviously familiar, hopefully, with the resource group that is created that has the infrastructure components of your cluster. We don't recommend anyone making any configuration changes or touching those Azure resources. And so resource group lockdown actually locks down that resource group and makes it not possible to change them without essentially a break the glass type function. And so this prevents that kind of inadvertent updates to those things. This is a standard configuration in our AKS Automatic, which is our sort of more pre-configured best practices approach to doing AKS that takes care of things for you. And again, it has this sort of resource group lockdown as one of the defaults, but you'll be able to GA this or use this in GA soon. Something you can try out today. Hopefully this is no issue for you, because it's really not an environment, an area of your environment you should be touching. And eventually this will most likely become the default for all clusters. Another thing to mention, Kata 1.3 update will come to the platform. Definitely take a look at the release notes. That's why I have it here. There's some breaking changes in there on certain scalars due to some functionality updates in Kata. Those are all a part of our release notes for the update. And so you'll definitely want to go take a look at that, make sure it doesn't impact anything that you're doing. So update around Kata, not that important, but the release notes around it definitely could be. So that is all I had from the roadmap for the base roadmap. I'll definitely go over and take a look at the chat here in a moment. But in the meantime, let me bring in Yuman here. I'm going to get my slides off the screen. Hello, how are you?
Hello. Hey, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We sometimes do this in these roadmap calls. Early on, we were doing it kind of more often, but I think some folks listening kind of want to get a bit more detail. I mentioned Azure Container Storage. I didn't say much about it. And so I've seen you kind of present this already, and I think the community would love to hear everything about Azure Container Storage, what we GA'd, and some of the details around it. So I'm going to put your slides up here and let you talk. I'm going to go away for a bit. Introduce yourself maybe first, though. I should have started with that.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Brian, for inviting me. I'm Yuming. Nice to meet you all. I am product manager from Azure Storage team. So me and my team focus on looking at our storage portfolio and see how we could best serve for the container use cases. So as we are seeing more of customers and developers are interested in running stateful containers on our platform, we wanted to make sure that from a storage perspective, we have the right experience from both the storage, the volume orchestrator aspects to also the foundational storage services that could really help fit in your need. So today we are going to talk about Azure Container Storage. Some of you may have heard about it. This is a product that we have it in preview, I think since last year, and then very recently, end of July, we just introduced the general availability of Azure Container Storage for backing storage type Azure disks and ephemeral disks. So Azure Container Storage, it is a container natively built orchestrator, volume orchestrator. So this is something which first it inspires us from the open EBS implementation. This is where we leverage the open source community work to incubate and then start off this project. So for Azure Container Storage, right now it is something that it serves three different backing storage type: disks, Azure Elastic-SAN, and ephemeral disks. Both disk and ephemeral disk are now in GA. Elastic-SAN is in preview. So the first question you may come into mind is that, oh, okay, so today I use Azure Kubernetes AKS clusters, and then I use a CSI driver. We have a portfolio, a kind of a full set of the CSI driver across disks, files, and blob storage. How is Azure Container Storage different? So for Azure Container Storage, we took a different approach than how we looked at the CSI driver. So our current approach for the CSI driver is that we have built the experience for every different storage product. So disks, files, and blob, you have different CSI drivers, so as Azure Native Files. Where we see that from a customer perspective, they are looking at having a Kubernetes native volume orchestrator that could give them a more consolidated experience regardless of the different backing storage type. So that's where we introduce Azure Container Storage, where you will have the same Kubernetes native interface into Azure Container Storage, and then you have the flexibility to choose what kind of backing storage type, depends on the workloads that you decide to run. And as part of building this, we have made a tremendous enhancements to help in addressing some of the challenges that you previously have encountered on how to reduce cost, how we can manage a faster scale out regarding of your PVs on your pods, and also as part of this, can we, how we are able to provide a unified management experience that is a Kubernetes native experience for you to interact with different Azure resources. So as I move forward, I'm going to kind of give an example regarding on, how Azure Container Storage is different from existing CSI drivers that is out in the market, using disks as an example. So today for CSI driver implementation, typically you place one persistent volume, one PVs against one disks, or or one cloud block storage. So that's kind of typical implementation in the industry. So in this case, what we actually notice is that sometimes for your PVs, you would have performance requirements which are not really in kind of statics. It could have bursty traffic in nature. Typically, what we have seen is that for stateful workloads, you have needs where your IOPS and bandwidth per capacity, which is per GB, could fluctuate pretty drastically throughout the life cycle of the workload. In that case, the current model of a single PV versus backed by a single cloud block storage unit sometimes is not the most cost-efficient manner. Where in this case, in Azure Container Storage, what we allowed is that we could place multiple persistent volumes against a single backing disk. In this case, it was we gave the example of using Premium SSD v2 so that you can specify what is the IOPS and bandwidth target on the single Premium SSD v2 disks and shared across the multiple PVs. So in this case, when you have a larger enough pool backed by a single Premium SSD v2, you could dynamically share the performance across the persistent volumes. So in this case, you'll be able to achieve a much better cost efficiency on top of that. In addition to this is when we look at kind of your scaling needs, this helps you to get past the typical limitations you have on on number of disks per VMs or per AKS node to be able to better scale independent of the size of your VMs that's hosting your AKS cluster. So in this case, for Azure Container Storage, no matter which VM type you deployed, you can attach up to 75 PVs for a single node. So that gives you a much more flexibility when you're using smaller core VMs like 4-core, 8-core VMs in supporting your traffic. So besides disk, we do support 3 different backing storage options. And the one that which is newly introduced into the mix is ephemeral disks, where it covers both local NVMe support and also the SSD support. So in this case, what we have heard from customers is that, typically these days, if you're looking at running some of the AI ML workloads, you deploy a GPU SKUs on Azure. It naturally comes with local NVMe drives. And we heard from a lot of customers that they wanted to have a more effective way to actually make best use of these local ephemeral disks. Where in this case, Azure Container Storage will be able to support you in deploying both ephemeral volumes and also persistent volumes on top of ephemeral disks. So here you'll be able to get the extremely low latency, high scaled IOPS and bandwidth from the ephemeral disks. And for workloads which you not purely use ephemeral disk from caching, you still want a better resiliency and availability. We also offer replication support and snapshot support on top of ephemeral disks so that it really expands out the type of use cases you can leverage for ephemeral disks besides just using it as a scratch space. With our recent release of GA, we actually added a kind of a full list of the different capabilities. I'm not going to drain into all of them. A couple where we heard of great things from our customers. Number one is about the resiliency for the ephemeral storage pool. So we had made a lot of improvements as how we actually place your PVs on the ephemeral disks and such, and how we actually manage the pod moves so that we will do our best to try to keep the storage and your pod in the same node so that you'll be able to continue leverage the data that you have previously written to the ephemeral disks. Then we added different performance tiers for the local NVMe storage. This is where it depends on your workload requirements. You may have different IOPS and bandwidth expectation from the local NVMe drives. So as you use Azure Container Storage, you can customize how much resources you're willing to give into driving the storage throughput. The other area we'd like to call out is about multi-zonal storage support backed by disks. So from a Azure Kubernetes cluster AKS perspective, for better resiliency, we strongly recommend you adopting multi-zonal deployment. So you could have your AKS cluster spanned across multiple zones. Then when you're running your stateful workloads, you would like to ensure that your data is also persisted across the zone, so that when you're doing the workload DR from one zone to fail over to the other zone, your data will also be available moving to the other zone. So as part of our work, we have enabled ZRS, which is zonal redundancy storage support, and also we have multi-zone storage pool support, so that you'll be able to have zonal alignments of your data and your pod. Like I mentioned, ephemeral disk is a new type of the storage options that we added into the mix. We would like to spend a couple minutes to share some of our observations or some of the key areas that we have enabled on the local NVMe. So from the local NVMe, that's one type of the ephemeral disks we support. We also support temporary SSDs. We're here using local NVMe as an example, as this is the one which has the larger capacity and also the best-in-class performance for locally attached storage. So for local NVMe drives, without replication, we provide a very comprehensive set of the capability. Not just that you can create, a volume, a persistent volume. We provide dynamic PV creations. We actually have a snapshot and auto scaling support, so that you are able to leverage this locally attached storage in similar fashions as you could, as it's a persistent volume. The other aspects to call out is about replication. So you could configure having replication against your local NVMe drives, which are either within zone or even across zone. So we wanted to highlight the scenario here, which is across zonal, to align with in these cases, the most popular, HA highly available configuration of the cross-zonal AKS deployment. So in this case, you will be able to leverage Azure Container Storage to use local NVMe drives and enable cross-zonal replications across the different nodes, AKS nodes that you have with the local drives. This gives you a very good cost efficiency of the block storage that is well balanced from a zonal HA support, and you can still enjoy the sub-millisecond read latency as we have done optimizations to optimize read from the local copy that is available in that specific zone. Typically, when you talk about storage, there's a general interest regarding of, what is the performance that you're getting on your ephemeral disks. So these are a couple of numbers that we benchmarked using a standard L16S v3 VMs on AKS. So you could so this is the performance definitely depends on the size of the local NVMe drives that is available on your VM SKU. So you can use this as a reference. But typically, we are both in our replication and without replication cases, you're able to achieve a very high IOPS that is typically, very sufficient for most of the popular OSS databases that you run on the stateful containers. So that gives you an indicator regarding of where we are landing. And we also looked at benchmarking this across some of the competitive solutions on the market. So from a latency perspective, as you can see, we can provide extremely low latency in the low sub-millisecond level. So this is probably better than anything you will see in the market at this point. So if you're looking into leveraging your ephemeral disk for, no matter it's a caching solution or it is for your online transaction type of processing type of workloads, it is, from a latency perspective, it stands very well. And if you need to run more IOPS intensive workloads, so we also did benchmarks with high queue depth, which you have a lot high parallelism. We are able to also support up to 400,000 IOPS on the read. Right now, we are around 60K. It's a little bit lower because it includes the replication overhead, as you need to you need to replicate the data across 3 copies. But we are making further improvements on this, so we expect that we could double it in the very near future. I have talked pretty much a lot about Azure Container Storage. There are more definitely for you to explore on our documentation website. One of the new things which we introduced is that we started a GitHub sample, which gives some few workload samples to help you get started with Azure Container Storage, so that you're not, simply looking at a storage solution, but you can, deploy some of the popular application for you to try out. Right now, we have 3 samples already published in the GitHub sample. We are in the process of adding more, and we also would like to hear your feedback and see your contribution into the GitHub samples as you are using Azure Container Storage or Azure in general, even Azure, Azure Kubernetes solutions to run any of your stateful workloads. And feel free to submit or update your copy, submit your examples into GitHub. But we are looking into leveraging this as a community effort to help both you and also rest of the developers in building more stateful applications on AKS. That's all I have today. So I will give the stage back to Brian.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And I did put a couple links in the chat for folks. Some of the things you mentioned the sample there, so I put the link to the samples, the docs, and some walkthrough videos. So there's some good content out there. So that's good to have. And yeah, thank you for that. I love seeing some of the details around performance and cost. I think a lot of customers are already doing persistent workloads in AKS and Kubernetes. But there's plenty of customers that really mainly use AKS for stateless workloads, and we want them to kind of be comfortable with, okay, if I start to do this, do I get the redundancy that I need? Do I get the price performance? And so this is, I think, really lays it out as to this is probably the proper way to go there when they're ready.
Exactly. Like Brian said, I think our approach is that some of the thinkings you have when you move from some of the, I think, additional thoughts you have when you move from stateless to stateful on resiliency, cost, how you place your data, and all that we wanted to have it baked into the default experience so that you don't end up needing to spend more time in thinking how I could do this, which kind of talk yourself out of looking at, running stateful workloads.
Yep. And we're providing more and more guidance in the AKS docs on how to do these things. So if you go take a look today, there's a couple there, but we're adding more and more things there to show people kind of how to do that. So good to see this. Congratulations on the GA. I'm sure it was quite a bit of work for you and everybody on the team. So very exciting. By the way, if people do have questions, I'll mention this one more thing before we wrap up. We still have the Ask Me Anything going on today on the Azure subreddit. All the links are right there. If you have questions for Yuman about Azure storage, Azure Container Storage, anything like that, or as well as really anything AKS related, come there, ask questions. We'll make sure you get answers. And with that, I think we covered everything we wanted. So didn't get kicked out of the live stream location. We had no glitches that I'm aware of. So this is incredibly more successful than the last one. So thanks, folks, for joining. If you're watching this recording as well, thanks for watching. Let us know what you think. Thank you, folks. Thanks, Yuman.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.